Hi there, and welcome to the CDFM study group. This is Helen Thomas. Today, what I want to cover is just to give you a brief overview or a visual of the government or the federal resource management environment. And it all begins with understanding the roles and responsibilities of the three branches of government. The first branch of government we're going to look at briefly is the legislative branch. Another word for legislative branch is the Congress. And the purpose of Congress is to create the laws. And understand that all our responsibilities for the three branches of government fall somewhere in the U.S. Constitution. So for the legislative branch of Congress, the responsibility to create the laws are governed in Article 1 of the Constitution. And the different sections are section 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, and 9. Those are the topics that are directly related to resource management. And so section 1 says Congress must have a House and a Senate, House of Representatives and a Senate side. Section 2, this House of Representative personnel serve 2-year terms. Section 3, two senators from each state, they serve 6-year term and they each have one vote. And so it doesn't matter the size of the state. Compared one smaller state and a larger state, the larger state will not have priority. So each state can have 2 senators. Congress is also able to raise revenue and collect taxes. But the most important part of Article 1 for us is Section 9, which says that no money can come out of the Treasury unless we have an appropriation law. So Section 9 is typically the reason why the government was shut down if there's no appropriation law or a continuing resolution put into place. Then the government was shut down. The reason you want to learn the three branches of government in this way is because it's directly related to their role and responsibilities in the Constitution. So legislative branch, create laws, Article 1. The second branch is the executive branch, which deals with the functions of the president. The function of the executive branch is to execute the laws. Once the laws are approved, the executive branch must execute the laws. Functions and responsibility of the executive branch are covered in Article 2 of the Constitution. Some things the president can do: hold office for 4 years, commander-in-chief of the military service, appoint ambassadors, and make recommendations to Congress in the State of the Union address. So whenever you hear the president's doing a State of the Union address, if you listen clearly, you will hear that he will state what his priorities are and what he would like to do in the upcoming year, kind of giving the legislative branch a heads up on things they can expect. The third branch of government is the judicial branch, which makes up all courts. The purpose of the judicial branch is to interpret the laws, make sure that they are not unconstitutional. The functions of the judicial branch are covered under Article 3 of the Constitution. So you have legislative, executive, judicial, directly related with Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3. So best to learn them in this order so you can directly know which part of the Constitution governs. So if you're given a scenario and it states Article 3 of the Constitution, blah, 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 then you can know that they're talking about the courts. All right, so the budget cycle has 3 phases. Phase 1 is the budget formulation. Phase 2, congressional action. Phase 3, budget execution. So within the budget formulation process, the Office of Management and Budget, Circular A11 is the guidance that's used. So it issues guidance. Organization begins to develop their budget estimates. Then their estimates are submitted to Office of Management and Budget. And OMB is the resource manager, for lack of a better word, for the executive branch, chief financial officer. So once they submit their estimates to OMB, they have a sit down. DOD and OMB will sit down to discuss this budget estimate during the fall review, typically between September and December of each year. So OMB holds hearings on the agency's budget. And then finally, when OMB makes a decision on what they're going to send forward or send to the president for review, OMB issues a passback. That's the result of the fall review. The president will then make final decisions on the budget, and the president is then required to submit that budget request to Congress no later than the first Monday in February. The second phase is the congressional action. What does Congress do once they receive the budget request from the president? The first thing that has to happen is the budget resolution process. Again, you have a House side and a Senate side. So they need to then determine what guidelines they're going to use as they review the president's budget. Congress has the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO. The responsibility here for the CBO is to gather all the financial historical data, the amount of revenues collected. Typically we do like a 5-year projection, but the amount of revenue, expenditures, what's our deficit, and so on. So all that data is gathered by the CBO, then submitted to the House Budget Committee and the Senate Budget Committee. Remember, there's two sides that make up Congress, so there's a committee for each one of these processes. So make sure you know which House and which Senate committee is responsible for that process. So budget resolution makes it easy because the House and Senate Budget Committee is responsible for budget resolution. Individually on the House and Senate side, they have to vote on the guidelines on their individual floors. Then they come together. If they have differences, the House and Senate will come together in a conference committee to work out those differences. Once they make a decision, the purpose and sole purpose of a conference committee, anytime you hear conference, you know they're coming together, is to resolve issues. So it doesn't matter if the House sends 10 people, the Senate sends 2 people. The bottom line, they'll have 1 vote from this side, 1 vote from that side. They have to resolve their differences. And then the end result is they need to go back to their floors, make the correction, because only one identical bill can be submitted. So they have to have one document once this conference is completed. So they go back to their floor, fix it, and then they come back together to make sure that they're using the same guidelines. The key here is remember that the budget resolution process does not go to the president. This is not a law. This is just something internal that the Congress does. So now they know what guidelines are going to be used to review the budget from the president or the federal budget. So the authorization process is the second part of the congressional action. Authorization, the sole purpose of authorization process is to authorize programs, authorize categories of things that you're going to be allowed to do. So authorize programs. Although funding may be in this authorization bill, the purpose and the approval of the authorization bill does not give us budget authority. So which House and Senate is responsible for the authorization process is the House and Senate Armed Services Committee. The process is exactly the same. They vote on their individual floors. They come together in a conference committee, go back to resolve issues. They go back to their individual floors. Then they come back together to make sure that they have one identical bill to send forward to the president for the president to sign. The end result of the authorization process is the authorization law. So this one actually becomes law. So for anything to become law, just know that it had to have gone back to the president for the president to sign off, veto, or whatever he needs to do. The third part of congressional action is the appropriation process. This is the one most of us care about, right? Because this is what grants us the budget authority to commit to obligate these funds. So the appropriation process is the responsibility of the House and Senate Appropriation Committee. It's easy to remember because it has the word appropriation in there. So this is the only one that's a little different, Senate Armed Services. So House Appropriation and Senate Appropriation Committee responsible. Process exactly the same. Both are on their floors, come together in a conference committee to resolve issues so they can have one vote, one voice, one document, go back to their floors, fix that document, come back, make sure that it is identical. One bill is sent forward and enrolled for the president to sign. Once the president signs the appropriation process, then we have an appropriation law. This is what then triggers the budget, the execution process. So the third part is budget execution. So again, we have to have an appropriation law to have budget execution. So Congress appropriates the funds. So that's what happened at the last part. We have the appropriation law. Two things actually happen once Congress appropriates the money. The first legal action is the Treasury issues Treasury warrant or appropriation warrant. That's just different words meaning the same thing. First legal action, because this is the one directly tied to Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. No money can come out the Treasury unless I have an appropriation law. So now we have the appropriation law. The Treasury issues the Treasury warrant. And all this is just a notification to the agencies to say that they have the law, they have the green light, and the accounts are set up ready for them to start spending. The second thing that happens after Congress appropriates is OMB begins the apportionment process. So what happens here is, let me go ahead and click different agencies. So all the agencies that get money from OMB, once Congress appropriates, the agencies have 10 days to submit an SF-132 to OMB. So it's kind of like saying, Mother, may I, Dad, may I have my money? I know that you said I'm going to get an allowance for X amount of dollars. Can I have my money? So agencies submit the SF-132 within 10 days of the appropriation law. And then OMB has 30 days, you see here, to act on it, to send the money to the agencies. So once DOD receives their apportionment, then DOD will issue allotment to the rest of us. And when we get our allotment, we commit, obligate, and outlay. Typically in this exam, you will not see the word disbursement because the legal term is outlay when the funds are removed from the Treasury. Now, what happens once DOD issues allotment? DOD also has a requirement to submit an SF-133, which is a report on the execution. So based on the DOD's estimate plan, then they have to look at what actually happened, how they actually spend the funding, and an SF-133 must be submitted quarterly to OMB to report on execution. And at the same time, we have congressional oversight. Because once Congress appropriates the funding and there are do's and don'ts associated with those funds. So we have to have congressional oversight by the Government Accountability Office, the GAO. The GAO is an independent auditing agency that works directly for Congress. So they're reporting to Congress, receiving guidance, reporting to Congress on making sure that we are spending the money the way Congress intended us to spend it. So a key here with all these A words, Congress appropriates, so this is the flow of funds, OMB apportions, DOD issues allotment, because these all tie also into fiscal law. When you talk about you cannot spend any money excessive or more than what you receive, or you cannot spend funding on how before you receive your apportionment. So if you say apportionment, you know that OMB is the one that apportions the agencies. So that means that particular ADA violation would occur between DOD and OMB. If you spend more than what was appropriated, that means Congress appropriates, it goes to OMB. So that means the violation would have been committed by OMB. So by knowing who appropriates, who apportions, who gives allotments will tell you when it comes to fiscal law which particular agency is going to be held liable under that ADA violation. All right, hopefully this made it a little bit easier for you to understand the resource management environment. And these are key players and what they do within the process. So thank you, and I will see you guys again next time.